What's up, everybody? Today we are going to be talking about originality and what it means, how we get there, and the general artistic journey to okay, we're going to try that again. I'm Justin Lowry, and today we're going to be talking about originality, creative originality, and the journey to it on this episode of Develop and Process. So artistic originality, this is a topic that I feel like doesn't necessarily get addressed enough in landscape photography and in photography in general. I feel like in today's culture, a lot of what we're primarily concerned about is popularity, not originality. So we tend to judge work based on how many likes it gets on Instagram, how many follows that photographer has, how much engagement metrics they have on social media. And a lot of times things like genuine authenticity, artistic originality just get thrown by the wayside or ignored entirely. And so I want to talk about that today. Now I want to break this down into 3 segments. The first one is the engineer. The second one is the explorer, and the third one is the artist. These are 3 steps that I just made up, but I think they're useful for illustrating the creative journey. And so the first step is the engineer phase. And all 3 steps are steps that I personally went through on my artistic journey, my creative journey, if you want to call it that. And I think they're necessary. That's one really important point I want to stress, is that talking about artistic originality, I don't want to make anyone feel like their work is inferior or that you're not doing something worthwhile if you're not creating original work. That's not my goal at all. My goal here is to kind of share my journey and my struggles with you, and in the hopes that it will personally help and benefit you on your own artistic development. So the first step is the engineer. I call it that because it's basically reverse engineering the work of other creatives. And whether you are a photographer, a videographer, a filmmaker, a musician, a graphic designer, a web designer, a painter, a sculptor, whatever it is that you do that's creative, you probably started out copying other people that you looked up to, and that's totally okay. That's totally normal. That's something that I did extensively. That's something that I think most of us do, if not all of us. And I think it's healthy. It's totally acceptable. I think when you're first starting out, you want to look at the greats of your craft, whatever that craft is. So if you're a filmmaker, you might look at Steven Spielberg's work or Martin Scorsese or something like that. You might look at a famous director's movies, and you may break them down and reverse engineer them and try and figure out his camera angles or her filming style or whatever color grading methods they use. If you're a photographer, you might look at Ansel Adams if you're a landscape photographer, or maybe you're a street photographer and you look at Henri Cartier-Bresson, or you look at Sebastião Salgado. You might look at Michael Kenna if you're a landscape photographer. You might look at David Munch. You might look at Galen Rowell. There's just a lot of different masters in each genre of art. Copying whatever the great work that has been done is a really useful way to learn skills. So I don't want to, poo-poo that or say that it's just wrong or something like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I also think that never necessarily fully goes away. And that's also okay because of one very critical thing. In our artistic development, if we stop growing, we start dying. And so if you've been doing art for, 25, 35 years, but you're not experimenting and growing, then yeah, you're going to stagnate and you're going to eventually die, meaning not physical death, but your art is going to die a creative death, and that's not good. So I think maybe you copy the work of somebody who's much better than you are, even if you have been doing it for 25 years, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to walk you through some examples of my own work that I think are from my engineer stage. The first piece I want to show you is an image I created in the Alabama hills. It's a image that I saw on social media, on Instagram specifically, and I think maybe 500px. It was created by Miles Morgan and Ryan Dyer. They're both on Instagram. They're really good photographers to follow if you're into that sort of work. And they created this really beautiful image out in the Alabama hills of this arch. And it has a cacti in the foreground and the night sky or the morning sky in the background. And I went out to Alabama hills and I tried to copy that composition. I searched all day to find it. Finally found the arch, and I was a little disappointed to find that there is no clear view through that arch that was in their photographs. It's physically impossible to make that image. So what they did was, as far as I can tell, is photoshopped out the background from behind the arch to make it look like a clear arch. And so I went and I photographed it, but I wanted an interesting sky like they had. So I had to photograph the Milky Way, the night sky, and then photograph the light on the foreground in sunrise. So I photographed at 4 and 6 a.m., merged the two exposures together. I also focus stacked, and that means I focused the later shot closer to the camera and the earlier shot farther back, so the sky would be in focus. And anyway, the image came out really good. It did take me about 7 hours of Photoshop to get it to where I wanted it. But at the time I was pretty happy with it because it achieved my goals. I learned a lot about Photoshop techniques, about focus stacking, about exposure blending, patience, scouting locations. And so you can see how that's a very useful creative process. But I do not refer to this image as original. It's not original. It's a copy. It's a knockoff. In the music industry, they call that a cover. And I really think that is a useful term. Guy Tal mentioned using it in photography, and he said, only in photography is it considered acceptable to blatantly knock off another artist's work and then claim it as your own. So he was saying that what we should do is, instead of just posting stuff online and saying, oh, I came up with this new image, or just letting people assume that you did, the polite thing to do would be to credit the original or the earliest possible composition that you know of, and say, hey, my image is a cover of so-and-so's image. So I did that. On this image, I credited Miles and Ryan, and I said, hey, this is their image. I'm just creating a remix. So the next example I want to show you is, I just mentioned Guy Tal. So this image here was shot in Death Valley National Park, and I won't tell you exactly where. And I had seen this slot canyon in Guy Tal's portfolio. He's a photographer that I really like, and I have one of his prints up on the wall here, actually. And he had created this image that was really, really strikingly beautiful, and had these blue tones and purple tones, and it just really was very different from other slot canyon images that I'd seen. The composition was impeccable. It was an amazing image. So I hiked 3, I think, different slot canyons in Death Valley, and I hiked all the way through them, looking for this composition. And I finally, on the third day, found it, and I was absolutely thrilled when I rounded a bend in the slot canyon and found this composition. So I set up the camera, and I literally had the Guy Tal composition on my phone and just lined up the camera to be exactly in the spot where his image was. And then I shot it on medium format Fuji Velvia film, and I was really happy with how it turned out, because it achieved the goal. Now, for good or for worse, the goal was to copy Guy Tal. So the image is a cover of Guy Tal's photograph. It's not original at all. I don't claim it to be so. It's a copy. It's a cover, if you will. It's a remix, and so barely. And so it's a great image. I'm really satisfied with it aesthetically, but it's not original. It's not creative art. It's a knockoff of a guy towel. But it was useful. I learned about, again, scouting compositions, this time about exposing film in shadows and reciprocity failure and long exposures and all of these useful skills. And I got to experience a place that Guy Tal had photographed, and I was really happy with it. So those are 2 images. I'll give you one more. This is an image I shot in Zion National Park. You might recognize the composition. It's the Imlay Boulder. It's a really famous spot. I can't pinpoint which artist originally shot this because it's been around for quite a while, but it's another example of an image that I don't claim to be original whatsoever. It's a knockoff. A million photographers have shot this comp, but it's one of my favorite images in my portfolio because it's super beautiful and it's a gorgeous scene and it captures the Zion Narrows just perfectly. And I've actually liked it so much I reshot it on large format because I wanted more detail. So I have 2 versions of this image and I'm very happy with how it came out. I just don't claim it to be original. So, that, again, perfectly fine if your image is not original, but I just think that we need to maybe look at that and say, what does this mean? Are we okay with it not being original? And if so, great. If not, then how can we improve? So that's the engineering stage. Now, the next stage. The next stage is the explorer. And I call this the explorer stage because it's artistic exploration. Basically, after you've gone through the engineer stage, you should now at this point be very familiar with your equipment. In the case of photography, you should know the exposure triangle, aperture, shutter speed, ISO or film speed. You should know composition. You should know, principles of color, balance, contrast, complementary colors. You should understand the color wheel. You should understand how to scout locations. You should understand the ins and outs of your camera, your lenses. You should understand, post-processing, development, how to get your artistic vision into reality. So that's what the engineering stage is useful for. The exploration stage is where you kind of take those skills and you try and figure out what it is that you want to do with them from the point of view of your creative vision. And so what I think, at least what for me happened was that I went and started looking at art in books. And I find that art books are an excellent way to kind of expand your horizons beyond social media and see the work of great masters. So in my case, one of the great masters was Elliot Porter. Another one was Philip Hyde. So I start looking at Elliot Porter's work, Philip Hyde's work, and a little bit of Dave Munch's work. And I especially like Elliot Porter's work because it's really natural, kind of subdued colors, low contrast, but very emotional. If you really love nature and you have ever spent any time exploring the American Northeast, Elliot Porter's work captures the soul of that place like nothing else. And I was really gripped by the tonality of his work. It's very natural, it's very subdued, and it's film. It's all film, obviously. And he shot large format as well, and he was one of the sort of influences for why I shoot large format today. And so was Philip Hyde, and so was Dave Munch. All of these guys shot large format film. So did Ansel Adams, Edward Weston, Brett Weston, and so on. And so I looked and I wanted that aesthetic, but at the time I shot digital, and that's fine. Again, there's many routes to the destination when we're talking about creating art. If you're a painter and you want to use watercolors or oils or acrylics, they're just different tools. And I think digital and film are just different tools. So you can just pick whichever one is going to work best for your creative vision. So at the time I had digital cameras, and I decided to use digital cameras to achieve my creative vision. The best way I could do that was to go and get the VSCO, the Visco presets, the Maston Labs presets for Adobe Lightroom. And I start using them and trying to emulate film like Fuji Velvia, Kodak Portra, Kodak Ektar, and I try to make images that look like film. That was an aesthetic decision. I wanted those natural, kind of subdued, organic feeling tones. I knew that was something I wanted in my work. I also knew that I was tired of the grandiose, sort of epic, crazy light and dynamic scenes and stuff I was seeing on social media. And I wanted stuff more like what I was seeing in the books, these really intimate, quiet, peaceful scenes that were serene, relaxing, calm, and really sort of captured nature with her hair down. And so I started working on creating images that moved in that direction. And so I actually succeeded. I'm very happy with a lot of the images I created using this method. And I did some work in Anza Borrego in the slot canyons, and some of that came out really well, and I was super happy with it. This image here is one I created using that method and showed it to David Munch, and he loved it and actually said I should do a series on it and maybe pitch it to some magazines and galleries. I did this other image right here, which I'm so pleased with. It's an image. There was a forest fire near me. I live in California, and the forest fire burned down this national forest, which is one of my favorite places to hike. And there was this beautiful grove of trees, of aspen trees, that burned down and was totally demolished. But aspens, as you may or may not know, are an organism that grows underground, and the whole grove is one organism. And then if you burn down all of the surface level trees, the whole organism is still alive, and it just springs back to life, and it's amazingly beautiful. And it's one of the first trees to recover after a forest fire. So this image, and I also made some other ones, might try and show them here if I can find them. And they were images I created using the presets, and they worked super great. I shot them on Micro Four Thirds, which is my favorite digital system, and I used the VSCO presets, and I was happy with how those turned out. But I felt like I could do better. So that's some of the exploration stage. Basically, I was moving around looking for what I wanted to create. Towards the end of the exploration stage, I moved into medium format and started shooting more stuff. Now, notice I said I shot the Guy Towel image I showed earlier on medium format. And so I was still doing a little bit of reverse engineering during the exploration stage. So they sometimes overlap, and sometimes the gray areas in between, they're kind of like fog. They're not really a brick wall. And so as I progressed, I knew I wanted higher quality images. I wanted to be able to print huge. I wanted to print 40 by 50 inches on a wall at like 300, 400, 500 DPI, 700 DPI. I wanted extreme, ludicrous mode image quality. And the only way I could achieve that was with large format. And I started seeing images by Ben Horn and Alan Brock and some of the videos they were producing of their scans and just showing the insane amount of detail that you could achieve. And lo and behold, the color tones, because they're shooting large format color film, were the tones that I loved from, Elliot Porter, Philip Hyde, Dave Munch, all their work. And so I said, hey, you can still do that today. You don't have to shoot digital and fake the film. You can actually shoot real large format color film in the 21st century. And so this was in 2015, 2016, and I was like, okay, wow, this is doable. And so I moved in that direction. And then I started creating more and more work. And large format brings with it a lot of limitations. And so I started thinking about what I could create best that would play to the strength of large format. And lo and behold, the intimate scenes that I liked were super well suited to large format, because large format really does extremely well with what we call high frequency fractal detail. It's like a bed of leaves or a forest filled with branches, sort of high density organic patterns and designs. And so large format film just renders those incredibly well. So I started creating images that played to the strengths of large format, and also started documenting some of my favorite locations like Death Valley, Anza Borrego, Zion National Park, and the Southern California mountains like the San Jacinto Range, the San Bernardino Range, and creating original work. I stopped seeking out icons and started avoiding icons. I stopped creating cover images and started creating original images. And there I moved into the artist stage. Now, the artist stage is sort of the final of the three stages. In the artist stage, now you know what you want to create. you've figured out your artistic vision, you've developed a personal style, you know how to use your tools, and now the only question left is what do I do with them? And so in the artist stage, that's where it gets hard, because if you go to like a Barnes and Noble or Amazon and you look for books about photography, or you look for magazines about photography, like 99% of everything you're going to find is focused on gear, or it's focused on the famous established locations and compositions. So almost all media is directed at people in the first two stages. Almost nothing is geared towards the third stage. And part of that's because there's not very many people in the third stage, so it wouldn't sell very well. Part of it's because everyone's different, and so something that works for one person in their third stage isn't going to work for another. But I really feel like there's a vacuum in that area right now where there's definitely a lot of room for exploring that third stage of creativity. And one publication is Brooks Jensen's magazine, Lenswork. I think that does a really good job of exploring the third stage. Some YouTube channels that talk a lot about the third stage would be The Art of Photography. I'll have a card come up here. That's Ted Forbes's channel. And he does a really great job of exploring the work of the masters and helping you progress into that through these stages. He doesn't call them those stages, but the principles are there. And so a couple of others, Nick Exposed, Nick Mayo, he has a channel. I'll also put a card up. He, again, talks about artistic development and creativity. Matt Day, another guy, great channel, talks a lot about making progress in that area. So those are some channels that I found useful. Here's some other ideas to progress. Books, like I mentioned earlier, I really think collecting art books that inspire you is critical in this stage 3. And that means work of the masters, like, your Bresson or your Ansel Adams or your Brett Weston or Edward Weston, or, it could be, if you're a nature photographer, it could be Franz Lanning, or it could be Sebastião Salgado, Michael Kenna, Nick Brandt. These are all some really great artists that have inspired me. And I started collecting their books and just going to their exhibitions. That's another huge one. I highly, highly, highly recommend that if you're an artist, go to exhibitions, because what you need to do is you need to see the work of people that have mastered your craft in person. You cannot, I'm going to say this again, you cannot experience great art on the internet. It doesn't work. You can see a microscopic, little pathetic, pixelated, compressed thumbnail that's optimized for short view times and high click numbers by advertising corporations, such as Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, or YouTube's owned by Google, and so on. They're not interested in you standing there for 20 minutes and looking at a piece of art. And they're also much more concerned with their bandwidth costs than they are with the quality of the art on their platforms. So they're not, there's just no way you can experience great art on the internet. You really need to get out there and buy books. That's the cheap way to do it. I recommend libraries and yard sales, used bookstores, stuff like that. Because new, they can be really expensive. And then going to exhibitions and shows wherever and whenever possible, because that's really critical. I've gone to a couple of different exhibitions. One was for a friend who's a Leica photographer at the Leica Gallery in West Hollywood, and he did a show. And then another was for Nick Brandt, and he did an exhibition in Beverly Hills, and I went to his, and whoa, I mean, those photographs just blew my mind. There were some of the best high quality prints I've ever seen in my life. They were like 120 inches wide and 4 feet tall, from 6x7 medium format black and white film. And they were just beautiful images, really soul shaking images. And I just got to see his creative vision being expressed at scale. And I thought it was really mind blowing, really inspiring. So anyway, those are some things that have inspired me on the stage 3. Now there's one last thing I want to mention, and that is projects. When you're trying to create original work, one of the best ways to do that is to put your mind in a project mode. So instead of thinking in terms of greatest hits or one-off images, think in terms of themes and projects. So Find something you're really passionate about, whether it's a person, a group of people, a location, a subject, a theme, and create a project based on exploring that idea. So for me, I'll give you 2 examples of projects that I've personally done, and maybe they'll inspire you to come up with something of your own. So the first project is my Mojave Monochrome project. Now, this is a project that was born in the Mojave Desert. I was out in Death Valley and I ran out of color film and started shooting black and white because it was the only thing left in my bag. And I had this Fuji Acros 100. And I got home and the photographs blew my mind. The tonality of the black and white film rendered the sand dunes of the desert in a completely different way than the color images taken on the same morning did. And I said, oh man, like this is a different medium from color, and I really need to explore this. So what I decided to do was make it my goal to photograph as many of the dune systems of the Mojave Desert as possible on black and white film. And then what I did was I took all those images and I assembled them into a magazine. Now, if you're familiar with analog photography culture, you've probably heard of Zines. And if you're familiar with fine art photography, I'm sure you're familiar with art books, which is what I just mentioned. So the problem with art books, like I said, is they're super expensive and no one can afford them. I mean, half these art books are like $100 to $200 if you buy them brand new. And I think that's amazing because the quality is unreal. But a lot of people can't afford those, and so they never get to experience the work in person. And that really is a problem, like I mentioned, because you can't experience art on the internet very well. So what I decided to do was take the concept of a zine and mix it with the concept of a book. And I did an 8.5 by 11 book that contains a dozen images and then wrote about 6,000 words of text to go with the images, telling stories and explaining the project and so on, a little bit of behind the scenes. So that's available right now in my Mojave Monochrome zine. This is, I call it Salt and Light. That's the series, and then Mojave Monochrome is the issue. And so that's my Mojave Monochrome project. And I'll put a link in the description where you can order that if you want. The ebook is $7.99 and the physical print version is only $14.99. Again, I wanted them to be consumable and affordable for normal, regular people. I didn't want, only art collectors to be able to afford them or be interested in them. So they're really geared towards everyone. I want you to be inspired by the project and be able to see the work in print, because that's what inspired me. And so hopefully it'll inspire you. The next project I did was the Zines palette project. Now, this is a project that is ongoing, like the Mojave Monochrome. I do them in installations. So I've already done the first installation of Mojave Monochrome, and there's probably going to be a second one eventually. And the first installment of Zines palette is out. And that I'll put here. That's the Zines palette issue of my Salt and Light zine. And again, it's an 8.5 by 11 soft cover portfolio book, but printed... I call it a magazine, and I print it using a very high quality magazine printing service because that allows me to keep the costs down and print them on demand for you and ship them straight to your door. And again, that's about getting physical printed art that you can actually live with in your home, in your hands, and that you can actually afford to collect. You don't have to be a wealthy art collector to buy it. And so that's what I did. I used Blurb. It's a really good, easy service to use. And I'm a graphic designer. I've done graphic design for like 17 years. And so designing magazines is something I do naturally. So I created the magazine myself using Adobe InDesign, and maybe I'll do a tutorial on that at some point. But anyway, this is, again, the Zines palette first install. The next one is in the works. That's coming out hopefully soon. But that's a project. So those are 2 projects that I did, and you don't have to make a zine. You can just put it on your website as a portfolio item, as a web page. Put the project on your web page that way. You could release it on Instagram. Instagram does in threes. So you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a grid. So you could make a project and then publish it on Instagram as a pre-planned choreographed 9-image or 12-image grid, even 18 images, sets of 3. So that's another way you could publish a project. Maybe you want to do a video. You could do video slideshow and talk people through the images, like with a voiceover or something. But these are ways that you can create images that have more meaning than just a one-off greatest hits. Bang, let's see how many likes I get on this photograph. And the most important thing about creating projects is that you are inspired to create original work by the very nature of projects, because now you're exploring themes which provokes creativity. It gets you to think about the world in creative ways, which naturally comes out in your art. So those are the 3 stages: the engineer, the explorer, and the artist. So hope that's useful to you. Hopefully that helps you make some progress and hits some WD-40 on the gears of your creativity, gets things rolling again. I'm Justin Lowry, and this has been Develop and Process. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to get future episodes. And until next time, stay curious.